So we come to Dukkha Nirodha, chapter 7. This is called the third noble truth, letting it all go. And the Pali of this section reads, Idanko panabhikoe dukkha nirodho arya sachang, yo tasayeva tanhaya asesa viragha nirodho chago patinitsago mutti analayo. Because there is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the complete fading away and cessation of this desire, its abandonment and relinquishment, the freedom from and discarding of it. Now the image is of this large blue-coloured figure, chunky character, looking very like the Hotai statue we have out in the lobby of the sala here. A very well endowed, well girthed spiritual entity, and we'll get to him and what that symbolizes in a little while, and Ajahn Sucitto's thinking and inspiration behind that imagery. Having highlighted the origin of suffering, the Buddha goes on to speak about its cessation. The way that the Buddha presented his teaching was to describe how to do it. His description of the results was much more sparing, at least in the Theravadan recension of his words. This teaching is like a toolbox that is offered to someone who wants to do the job and considers it worthwhile. It's not a teaching one finds immediately inspirational. One result, and perhaps even the purpose of such an approach, is that it doesn't arouse a lot of desire. You're not promised something in the future that is painted in such rosy terms that you get greedy and ambitious for it. In some ways the presentation is rather daunting. Plenty of talk about suffering and hindrances, not much about joy and bliss. But you have to want to practice from a very realistic perspective, and be prepared to go through some hard work and to develop some skills. It needs more than an immediate inspirational high to take you across. This is a fair approach. It identifies the root of the obstruction and how to remove it. If you need to hold on to something, maybe this isn't the way for you. If you want to follow it, be prepared to give up a lot and to bring forth your own energy. Well, I frequently make this same kind of point when people are asking about Buddhist teachings, and particularly when some member of the family or a friend has died, and they say, she's been reborn in a better place, hasn't she, Ajahn? She's gone up to heaven, hasn't she? And I'll say, well, maybe yes, maybe no. And one of the things is that I point out is that Buddha Dhamma is not it's not a consoling teaching. It doesn't say, don't worry dear, everything will be all right. It's not a sort of, Dad will kiss it better and make it go away, which is, not to put down many other religions, but that is a strong theme in many religious mythologies, is that it's all going to turn out fine in the end. Whatever happens, we're all going to go to heaven, we'll all become one with the divine, we'll all be absorbed into Brahman, we'll all go to Kismet, or it'll all end happily ever after, somehow. But what you have in Buddha Dhamma, at least in the southern Buddhist tradition, is that you don't have that kind of consolation or promise saying it'll all be all right, won't it? And the Buddha's response in the Pali tradition is very much, well, it's up to you. It's not, and nothing is fixed. And if you do the right things, if you work with your mind and your life in the right way, then yes, it will all end very happily ever after. But if you don't do the right things, then it's not going to end that way. It's not going to end. And so that is daunting, or is challenging for people. And so, because there's something in us that is quite childlike, that is like sort of, you let mummy kiss it better, and then, it's gone away now. And that sense of wanting a reassurance from a quite a childlike place within us, and there's something that is comforted in us by that sort of promise. But as Ajahn Sucitto focuses on here, and I feel is a tremendous strength of the Southern Buddhist approach, what you have in this tradition, is that it's far more a teaching of self-reliance. It's like, well, it's up to you. It's not just a matter of hoping for the best and revering the Buddha, but it's up to you. If we act in a skillful way, if we awaken, then the heart will be liberated. If we don't act in a skillful way, if we don't use the opportunities that we have, then it won't end that way. It's up to you. And so that's more of a challenge, a demand. It's like saying, well, if you want to get to the top of the mountain, yeah, you can do it, but you got to make some effort. You got to do something to get up there. It's not going to just happen on its own. You've got to put forth a effort, make commitment, and there's a degree of surrender and sacrifice that's involved in that. So I often, and sometimes when I speak in those ways to people in a very straightforward fashion like that, people feel, oh, how rude, or well, that's not very nice. It's the Buddha is trying to be realistic and helpful, and is far more beneficial for us in the long run to be able to recognize, if I want to get to the top of the mountain, I'm going to have to do some climbing. I'm going to have to do something to get up there, and that it's better to know that we have some work to do, and then to set about learning how to do it and carrying it out, rather than just developing a sense of devotion or hope. And if any of you who have looked at the quality of hope itself, hope is a refined form of suffering, really, because it's always placing the preferred reality over there somewhere. It's like off in the future somewhere else. There is it that we can move towards. That's promised, but the main thread of the Buddha's teaching, and particularly within the Pali Canon, is a sense of wake up. The Dhamma is here and now, and but it needs to be you. It needs to be you that does the work. It needs to be you that does the waking up. The Buddha can only point the way. It's up to us to follow the instructions. So then Ajahn Sucitto continues. One aim of these paintings is to enhance the meaning rather than to dilute the message. Here the frame has become a smooth circle rather than a blazing circle or a circle of barbed wire. The symbol of wholeness and fullness. The colour within it is blue, the cool, spacious colour. Within the circle sits a cross-legged, bloated but radiant being. Cessation does not come about through wanting to become more joyous and wise or more attractive and popular. It's an expansive realization that is itself joyous and wise. It comes into being through giving up the mind-held images that we feel we need to be. The personal image portrayed here doesn't arouse a desire to become like that, but it may arouse in the heart a certain recognition of letting go. I think, and that's also what Ajahn Sucitto was trying to convey with this radiant arahant with his sort of belly spilling, well over his waistband. That this guy is not hanging on to anything. And also this the color blue. This was in the earliest days of Amaravati when Lumpur Sumedho founded this monastery. Then those of you who might have been around at the time, maybe one or two of us, will remember that the pale blue was the colour of choice, and that was the sort of iconic colour for Amaravati, because Lumpur was trying to evoke this quality of infinite space and possibility, and the presence of the deathless reality in that quality of pale, radiant blue was the colour that most spoke to him of those qualities. So back if you see the earliest photographs of Amaravati, we had sort of blue curtains along these walls were painted blue, and we had blue curtains in the in the old Dhamma hall up behind where the Buddha image was, where the temple is now. That used to be the old school gymnasium and assembly hall, and we converted that to be the Dhamma hall for some years. There was the Buddha Rupa that's in the Bodhinyana hall. That was in the Dhamma hall there, and we had these sort of filmy pale blue curtains. And then when we had the monastery opening in May of 1985 for Amaravati, then that was the sort of the little brochure, the booklet that we made for it was things were in pale blue. And when we had the exhibition for the display that we made for the Katina time, about 30 years of Amaravati, that was why I chose pale blue as the background color. That's in recognition of that. Not that you can say that the deathless has a color, but it was also that quality of spaciousness and peacefulness that is evoked by that color. So then he goes on to talk about this image, the figure in the painting that Ajahn Sucitto has done. This is a traditional Thai image called Sankachayana, which is a symbol of good fortune and benevolence in the universe that comes about through personal relinquishment. The story goes that or Thai for Venerable, Sankachayana was a bhikkhu at the time of the Buddha, who was very handsome and had acquired a lot of magnetism through mind cultivation. He was an arahant, an enlightened being, but his personal attractiveness was stimulating some rather unenlightened interest in the hearts of many of the ladies of the area. This monk felt embarrassed that he should be receiving such attention, and he didn't think it was very helpful to the womenfolk either. So he decided to bloat himself in order to look like a slob. So and that's actually quite a popular image in Thailand, Sankachayana, and Lumpur Sumedho had been given a few of them. They look like kind of giant gummy bears. There was a red one and a golden one, and I think either a blue or a green one. And so I think that was there were a few of these sitting around his kuti, and so that I think had inspired Ajahn Sucitto to this particular image for this particular area of the sutta. So he made himself very large, expanded himself, and here he is in the painting demonstrating letting go and helping to induce it in others. There's a message there for those of us who feel we need to have charisma, a good image, and hordes of devotees to confirm our enlightenment. So that it's also that the large sort of bloated stomach and the kind of smiling face is very much an image that you find within the Chinese Buddhist world, and that character called Hotai. So the image is there in the hallway. I think that actually comes from Korea, that one. But he has a similar role in the Northern Buddhist iconography of being a symbol of benevolence and abundance. And he's standing on a sack, and it was according to legend, he was a great saint in China, and everyone thought he was a bit of a simpleton, a bit soft in the head, and he spent his whole time making wooden toys for children and traveling around and giving them away to the local kids. In a story that Master Hua tells about him, he said how during his lifetime this monk was regarded as a bit of a crazy guy and a bit of a fool, and nobody took him seriously. But then when he passed away, then all of these sort of great forest ajahns sort of came out of the woods. All the great meditation masters of China sort of came from far and wide to show up for his funeral, and the people who had been around said, "Wow, these great, the enlightened masters have all come for the funeral of this crazy monk. What are you, Venerable Sirs? What are you all doing here?" Said, "Oh, don't you realize he was far more enlightened than all the rest of us." But he hid his light. So then he continues. Sometimes you meet teachers and sages who have a lot of personal charm. Sometimes they are wise and trustworthy. Sometimes they are not. People make a lot out of the personal magnetism that a teacher may have. This has led to several disastrous incidents when some famous sage or another has been discovered salting away uncounted millions in a Swiss bank account or seducing 14-year-old girls. My experience of sages is very limited, but I have met monks in Thailand who said little, looked small and insignificant, or were homely and garrulous, and yet exemplified a life of great purity, kindness and insight, even if they couldn't give rousing talks. Incidentally, in Theravada, monks and nuns are not supposed to talk about their attainments. Some people say it's because we don't have any, of course, but it's really to prevent the arising of a cult based upon a personality. That would be detrimental to their practice. Even if the monk or nun is a very wise being, statements about their attainments would draw more attention to the personality than to the practice, and there is a natural inclination in that direction anyway. Most disciples at some time want to emulate their teacher, but this need not be encouraged. It's a process everyone has to go through, suffering a lot on the way, until there's a realization that there are no real role models. You have to work with your mind and habits and the way the truth expresses itself through you. So this is a very significant point, that we have strict rules about particularly making false claims about being enlightened, or having psychic powers, or even having meditation attainments like and being able to enter jhana and such like. And the rule is that if you make a claim and you are intending to be believed and it's not true, then as soon as you say it and your words are understood by the person that you're saying them to, at that moment you are no longer a monk or a nun. That's it. Your life as a monk or a nun is finished at that point. You can be reordained as a novice if you want, if you persuade someone, but that it's such a serious offense that the Buddha put it on a par with committing murder and such like, because he saw that he said that one who deceives the public, and basically the people would be regarded as making those claims in order to, say, impress people or to get famous or to acquire wealth and such like, and reputation. And he said this is one of the way of life of a great thief. This is one of the ways of being a great thief. You're stealing, you're acquiring your sort of strength or reputation by stealing the faith, robbing the faith of the many folk. And so the Buddha held it as a very, very serious offense, one of the most serious offenses possible. But also, even if it's true, even if someone does have those attainments, then it's a medium level offense to talk about it. And so this sometimes people wonder about that, but it's because the Buddha made it very clear that the way of establishing faith in people and to help people along the path was not just to be dazzled or impressed by the particular accomplishments of another person, but to look within yourself. And so that, and frequently when people came to Ajahn Chah and said, Venerable Sir, are you an arahant? They say you're an arahant. Are you really an arahant? And he'd say, well, why do you want to know? And or he'd say, how's that going to? If I say yes or no, how's that going to help you? What what benefit is it to you if I say yes or no? And so he would never answer those kind of questions in any kind of a straightforward way. And maybe he'd say something like, "Well, it takes one to know one." That you can't judge those things lightly. And it's also creates a very skillful atmosphere within the community, because you're not sort of judging each other or talking about those things on a day-to-day basis, but rather it's something that is sort of not made central. So if someone does have a reputation, or word sort of spreads that they are someone who's very accomplished in some way or another, then it gets referred to or it gets addressed, or people understand, well, that's the case. But and sort of word trickles through but without anybody saying, yes, I am this, or yes, I've reached this attainment, and you should as well. And so that it creates an atmosphere of evenness and mutual respect within the community. So you're not judging each other or ranking each other according to those perceived accomplishments. And so the Buddha, when he considered what way to establish hierarchy in the community, he decided to do it simply on the date of your ordination, the date that you go forth as a nun or as a monk, and the time of the day. That's what dictates who sits first in the line or who goes through the door first. And that's how seniority is established, not around whether someone's a stream enterer or a once returner, or this one's got jhana, that one, Venerable Rishiro, he can enter fourth jhana, so he should go in front of Ajahn Amaro can only enter third jhana. Yeah, you get very, very complicated. I think Ajahn Amaro, his jhanas are much more well established than Tanrachiro, so I think he ought to go through the door first. So those things are very subjective, but the date, the time that you went forth, that's easy to record, and then when the ordination happens, then that's the job of one of the Sangha members, is to note the time the ordination happened, the time, the date, okay. Then that is easy, inarguable, and practical. And even in the Buddha's lifetime, when even Arahant disciples of his displayed their psychic powers in public, he was very critical. And there was one particular incident where this monk called Pindala, who had great psychic powers, he and Mahamoggallana were walking through, I think it was Rajagaha, on their alms round in the morning, and they came through this square, and there was this big commotion going on, lots of people milling around, lots of noise and activity, and so they asked, what's happening here? They said, oh, well, this rich merchant, he's put this very valuable sandalwood bowl up on top of this very, very high pole right in the middle of the square here. And he's made a challenge, any yogi who can fly up in the air and pick the bowl off the top of the this pillar, this pole, then they can keep it for themselves, and it was worth thousands and thousands of gold pieces. And so Pindala, being blessed with psychic powers, and then just said, "Oh, that's pretty easy." Floated up in the air, picked the bowl off the top of the pole, did 3 laps of Rajagaha, in midair, and then flew back to the Veluvana, the bamboo grove. So of course this had an impact upon the people of Rajagaha. So then the Buddha's sitting there in his kuti and saying, Ananda, what's all this noise? Who are all these people? Why is the Veluvana suddenly no longer quiet and silent and serene? Because half the town's population had come pouring out to see more of this flying monk. So then he heard what had happened, and so he said, please invite Pindala to come here. And Pindala, who was an arahant, and arahants are incapable of acting in ways that are deliberately unskillful. So he's an arahant, he's free from greed, hatred, and delusion, but the Buddha gave him a real roasting. A very, very pointed kind of, don't do that again. It's disgraceful, it's stupid, and you're an embarrassment to the Sangha. And so from that time, then the Buddha made it clear you're not allowed to display, if you have psychic powers, you're not allowed to display them in public. And so it's a medium weight, it's not a disrobing offense, but it's a medium weight offense if you do that. And so that, and it's also interesting within the Buddha's own life story how he, if you read the stories, in the first couple of years after the Buddha's enlightenment, there's quite a number of incidents where he performs psychic feats of psychic power, and in quite an overt or public way, so that people were aware of it and people could see it. So like taking the whole, when there was invited to eat at somebody's house, and they come to the river, and the river's in flood, so they can't cross it. So then, flying the whole sangha across the river to go to the invitation to eat at somebody's house. Or when he was met the Kassapa brothers, when and he was trying to convince the Mahakassapa that his teaching was worth listening to, and he did all kinds of magical things while he was staying with the Kassapas that the other yogis could see, and yet after a couple of years, those kind of stories seem to pretty much disappear after the first 2 or 3 years. Then it seems like the Buddha was, and it's not specifically spelled out in the teachings, but if you follow the trajectory, it becomes much, much rarer that he does any kind of magical, say, not performances, but he performs any kind of psychic feats or displays of magical power. And it seems like he felt that he was getting the attention for the wrong reasons. Like, well, they all come here to watch the magical tricks, or to expecting me to do something special, but they're not listening to the Dhamma. And that's a perennial problem. So it seems that after that, he very rarely actually did anything of that nature, certainly in any kind of public way. There is also and not just displays of psychic power, but when somebody has a reputation for being a great saint, then people will come to them just for blessings, or to get sort of things from them, whatever they can from them, to take away as some sort of special protective charm. We were having a discussion the other day about sprinkling water and holy threads and such like. And there's this time Lumpur Sumedho spoke about very, very often, when this time when he went traveling with Lumpur Cha to visit many of the great forest ajahns around the northeast, and they went to stay with Lumpur Khao at Wat Tham Klong Pang, and this group of people were visiting, and they were chatting with Lumpur Khao, and he was giving some teachings, and he was chewing betel nut, as the forest ajahns would often do, and chewing betel nuts, so spitting into the spittoon, and also along the way he sort of spent a bit of time clipping his fingernails and dropping them into the spittoon as well. And so when this group of people were about to depart, they asked him if they could have the spittoon full of chewed betel nut and nail clippings. And he said, why do you want these? And there's this whole long back and forth. So this is just a folk belief and tradition. It's not going to really help you. I've been giving you Dhamma teachings for the last hour and a half. And that's going to help you much more than my nail clippings or some chewed betel nut. And so he sort of gives them this whole, another round of teachings about why the practicing the Dhamma and following the Eightfold Path is much more useful than nail clippings, and really gives them a sort of full-on explanation of why this is what's really a benefit. And then, but still, so even I say, oh yeah, Lumpur, yes, that's really true. Thank you very much, Lumpur. That's so true. That's so true. That's so true. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So can we have them? So of course, eventually he let them take the spittoon away and get this sort of goopy mess out of it that was, I'm sure, extremely treasured for the rest of their lives and made into amulets and such. And and then he said to Lumpur Sumedho and Lumpur Cha, it's amazing, isn't it, how people that you offer them the Dhamma and all they want is your debris, or the sort of scraps and leftovers. That's all they're after. But they offer them the Dhamma, there's the most precious treasure, and all they want is your this dross, or this detritus of human life. So anyway, carrying on. In Buddhist monasticism, it is the Vinaya, the code of conduct, that provides the standard for personal behavior, not the teacher's personality or wishes. This creates a communally held level of modesty, trustworthiness, and community consciousness, in which no one is out to prove that they are or aren't anything. You learn to give up the desire to become somebody, and also the desire to drop out of it all and become nobody. Ideas about oneself or one's position are checked by this way of life. Rather than conceiving oneself as a teacher or is incapable of giving talks, there is the encouragement to explain the teachings of the Buddha in the best and most authentic way that you can, if asked to do so. Also, a good point on this is Ajahn Chah's teacher, Ajahn Man, was an extremely gifted and very compelling teacher. When he was a teenager, he had been a Moor Lam singer, a local folk singer. In northeast Thailand, they have this kind of local folk music, which is it's like spontaneous versifying. So that you get two singers up on stage, and then they have a band going with a local musical instruments and their sort of local folk music, and then the two compete with each other, and they have to make up verses spontaneously in response to what the last one sang. And the first one who can't complete a line, then they're the loser. So it's like spontaneous song creation. And so Ajahn Man was very gifted at this when he was a teenager, and well known for having that kind of very quick mind, quick-witted, and very eloquent. But his teacher, and so when he gave Dhamma talks, similarly, they were extremely eloquent and very well put together and very colourful and compelling. But his teacher, Ajahn Sao, was almost completely silent, and he was a completely different character at the other end of the spectrum altogether. And there are not surprisingly, there are no recorded teachings of Ajahn Sao that I'm aware of, but the story goes that he would be invited. He would be the senior monk at some gathering. He would be invited to get up onto the Dhamma seat, and he'd climb up onto the seat on the observance day and recite the Namo Tassa. Then he'd say something like, "Being good is good." Anyone? And then get down off the seat. And that's your Dhamma talk, So for those of you who are a little tongue-tied and not very eloquent, then there's plenty of scope for these succinct Dhamma talks. But he was Ajahn Man's teacher. Like he was he was gifted as a teacher, very accomplished as a practitioner, but he just was not very colourful or not very so compelling as a speaker, and that so the worth of a being in the Sangha is not defined by whether they can give eloquent and colourful Dhamma talks, or whether they can't. But there's a whole different dimension of spiritual qualities that are the things that really matter. Also, on that same note, I spent a lot of time in the States and worked together with the Spirit Rock Buddhist Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and I was part of the teachers' circle there. Within that Vipassana meditation group, the teachers are very, very identified with being a teacher, and so you in a way you graduate from being just a yogi to becoming a teacher. And they couldn't understand, over and over again, they couldn't believe it when I said, "Well, I don't really think of myself as a teacher." And they said, but you are a really good teacher, Ajahn. I said, "Yeah, I think of myself as a monk who teaches from time to time." And then I remember one meeting when I said to them, if I never gave another Dhamma talk for the rest of my life, I wouldn't feel any kind of loss or anything missing at all. And there's this, what? Because the group, the sort of, in that group, excellence or accomplishment, it becomes defined with the role of teaching. And I'd say things, there's nuns or monks in my community who've been around for years, decades, and they hardly ever give Dhamma talks at all, and no one thinks that there's anything wrong or bad, or that they should, or there's some kind of weakness, or they're not doing their bit because they don't give Dhamma talks. Like some people give talks, and some people are very happy and comfortable doing that. Other people, they're far more content, and they function much better in a different mode, more happy to teach one-to-one on a personal level, be available to other community members in a whole different way, or just not talking very much at all. And so it was a really a different style. It was quite a gulf that you could sort of looking at each other across this big gap. And I think many of them didn't even really believe it when I said, yeah, I don't think of myself as a teacher. I go to Buddhist teachers' conferences, but really, I don't think of myself as a Buddhist teacher. And they think, oh, he doesn't really mean, he's just saying that. So I say, no, I'm a monk. I'm not supposed to lie. That's my profession. I'm trying to be honest. But the role of teaching in that sphere has become kind of the identity of so if you are a mature practitioner, then you become a teacher. So, carrying on. We'll talk more about the practice in the next phase of the sutta. I'd just like to point out here how easy it is to mistake abandonment for getting rid of. Maybe the words are nearly the same in English. So the word for abandonment is these chago is sort of relinquishment, patinitsago, to abandon, and muti is freedom from desire, and analayo, the discarding of it, that which is which is let go. So chago and patinitsago, abandonment and relinquishment, are the words he's talking about here. Maybe the words are nearly the same in English, but having been told about vibhava-tanha, desire for non-existence, as a powerful originator of suffering, one should be careful about the desire that wants desire not to exist. In the reality of spiritual practice, there is a great difference between abandonment as a state of not holding on to desire and aversion to the existence of desires. There's a contrast between those two. Desire will always be experienced as a constriction of the mind around some object, either to have it or to repress it, whilst abandonment of desire is an equanimous, malleable, and gentle mode of mind. Abandonment opens to the present, and the here and now is not within the realm of desire. Desire operates on the possible realization of what is not here now. Annihilation attempts to suppress desire, whereas in the here and now there is the experience of the mind at rest from desire. This is cessation. That's a very fine description there, well chosen words on Ajahn Sucitto's part. Abandonment opens to the present. So that's letting go of everything, like sort of spilling girth, letting go of everything. Then the point that desire is always about what's next, getting rid of something that I don't want. When I've got rid of this, then I'll be happy. Or when I've got hold of this, then I'll be happy. It's the mind creating time and inhabiting that time-bound structure. Whereas abandonment is letting go of time. It's the heart open to the present. And as in one of Ajahn Chah's very neat phrases on this same theme is, he said, a samana, a religious seeker, is one who has no future. Which to the ego-centered mind and self-view is very threatening. No future? But to the heart, it's like, yes, no future. So just reflecting on that phrase can be very helpful to point in this direction. Sometimes the desire to get rid of is disguised as non-attachment. In this guise, it causes a certain stiffness and defensiveness of manner. Don't bother me. Or a tendency not to face up to what is going on and learn from it. The other extreme of the desire to get rid of is wanting to be involved in everything and to solve everybody's problems for them. Getting caught up in the desire to solve everyone's problems is agitating and oppressive too, even if one is not consciously trying to become the great saviour. Some of these forms of desire are subtle and snag people whose intentions are generally good. Trying to get rid of other people's problems can have the same contradictory effect as trying to get rid of your own. Both well-intentioned aims go astray when they affirm that problems actually belong to us. That is, by concentrating on them in a negative way, we unconsciously affirm their reality and lose perspective. So by saying, I've got this problem, I need to work on it, we reify, we make that problem a real thing, rather than, and you often hear us in this sort of Buddhist jargon saying, there are no problems, there are just interesting difficulties. Or as when Harold Macmillan was asked about the Suez crisis, and he said, Mr. Prime Minister, well, what do you feel is the way to solve the problem in Suez? And he said, there is no problem in Suez. Excuse me, Prime Minister, surely you're well aware that the Egyptians have taken over the canal, and there's the French and the British are lining up, and there's a prospect of further war, and we have the whole Israeli question and the Arab question, and this is all in a very complicated tangle of forces. How can you possibly say that it's not a problem? And Harold Macmillan famously replied, to call it a problem presumes that there is a solution. There is no solution, therefore it's not a problem. Also a good one to sit on. So, yeah, come on, but it's also the way we label things, and that by sincerely taking hold of something and saying, I've got to work on this problem, I've got this problem, I need to do something about it, we are unconsciously creating a me who's the true possessor of this thing. So we've made the me solid and the thing solid, and it's a problem, and I've got to do something with this problem. So I'll be me without this problem, and won't that be good? And as Luang Por Sumedho would often say, that we need to change the paradigm so that we, instead of seeing things in terms of me and my problems, it's seen in terms of the Buddha mind seeing the way things are, the wisdom mind seeing how things are. So maybe just to say how we can also feed our sense of solving other people's problems can, even though that's a very beautiful and noble intention in many ways, it can be largely built around our sense to feel like we're needed, or to be having some purpose. And many years ago now, I think it was 15, 20 years ago, they did an in-depth survey in this country with the social workers. Maybe there's a few social workers here, I don't know. But they did a personality profiling for all of the social workers in Britain. I think it's like 300,000 or 400,000 social workers around the country. And what they found, to their horror, was that about 90% of social workers in Britain had an almost compulsive need to be needed. That that was an immensely important factor in their life, and that also verging on the, not exactly worthy of hospitalization, but on the verge of someone who's seriously dependent on this. So then there was this whole long discussion going on in the pages of The Guardian and other places about, well, what should we do? Do we dismiss 90% of the workforce from social services, or do we look at that quality within the lives of people who want to help others, and to see what's the driving force behind that urge to help, along with helping others. Are you in a sense strengthening that neediness in yourself unconsciously? The practice goes deep, and has been pointed out. The roots of suffering are in viewpoints and attitudes existing beneath the level of conscious activity. As we saw in the discussion of dependent origination, the sense of self, the I am, is the wrong view arising from ignorance, which then conditions compulsive activity in terms of that self. Whenever we try to get rid of self, we unwittingly reinforce it. For example, if we believe that compulsive habits and desires are me or mine, we may feel that we are this kind of a person who has a lot of weaknesses and has to do a lot to get rid of them in order to become enlightened or to become a true disciple of the Buddha, and so on. We believe that to get results, we have to do something. We assume that giving up and abandonment are always about doing something with body, speech, or mind. This attitude can foster real greed for renunciant practices or great resolutions, and these can strongly increase our sense of identity. So this is very true. I spent many years trying to be the champion ascetic of this community, trying to sort of outsit and outdo everybody else in terms of austerities. Yeah, because unconsciously. But in retrospect, I saw that I was just trying to. I turned the kind of competitive urge. I brought it into the monastic life, so that I was trying to be the kind of super monk that was doing more austere practices and say putting myself through more difficulties and enduring more, say more of the Dhutanga practices than anybody else, and so I'm not realizing how much my mind was identified with that. And it was after I was here in Amaravati for I think I've been about a year and a half or so. I was coming up to the winter retreat of 1987, so January of 87, at the end of 86. And at that time I had this whole massive slew of different things that I was doing. I didn't lie down to sleep at night. I hadn't laid down for about 3 years or so. And I had all these, I was a kind of hyper strict vegetarian and all kinds of things that I had on the boil. And I began to realize that I felt completely clogged up with all this stuff. Even though it was all about renunciation, it was all this stuff that I was doing. And so, anyway, I went to Lumpur Sumedho and we were talking about the upcoming winter retreat. And the previous year, we'd had a very, very strict routine, like getting up at 3 a.m, staying up till 11 at night, and really sort of cracking the whip for the community. And Lumpur said, yeah, well, I didn't really like the results of that. It was really too much kind of this classic spiritual materialism that people feel they've got to work harder and do more and be sort of tougher and stronger. And he said it didn't have a very good result. So I think it's much more sensible to have things arranged in a more even and a sensibly human way. And I said, well, I agree, because I've been feeling like I really ought to just give up all these ascetic practices I've been doing, and it's been worthwhile in many ways. But I really think I'm just going to give up all this sort of not lying down at night to sleep and such like. And I thought Lumpur Sumedho was going to say, "Oh well done, you gave it a good shot," and but I understand it's probably wise to sort of slack and to back off a little bit on that. But instead of that sort of, oh well, if you have to, that's okay. As soon as I said I'm going to give up all my ascetic practices, he said, "Great, about time." And I thought, what? And he was waiting for me to get, and I suddenly began to see, his comments about changing the routine for the winter retreat and making things a bit more human were, like, it was kind of hint, is this idiot going to get it? But so I can relate to this particular point very, very personally. So just to then finish this little bit. If we think that we don't need to work on our minds, we also miss the mark. We know suffering arises. We can observe the careless habits of self-view which perpetuate the suffering. We should not take these habits personally, but practice with attention to realize the purity of being that does not create them. Patient effort is needed. That means a renunciation of the wish for progress, as well as a dispassionate acceptance, not an approval that what we are experiencing is the way things are right now. Or as Suzuki Roshi put it, everything is perfect exactly as it is, but there's always room for improvement. It's another one to put on your fridge. Everything is perfect exactly as it is, but there's always room for improvement. And so I was having a conversation the other day with someone, how the sense of when you can feel that strivingness and trying, and then when you just stop all the tryingness and you just let yourself relax, suddenly there's this incredible peace. Then, but what we can miss is that peace is coming as a counterpoint to all the striving. If we grasp that wrongly, we think, oh, well, the striving was totally wrong, so I should just sort of lie here in a heap and be peaceful. And any kind of effort is therefore out of place, so I should just sort of be. And so that's called wrong understanding. But more, it's learning how to let the effort come from a place of mindfulness and wisdom, rather than me trying to get something, me trying to get rid of my problems, or me trying to become enlightened. So anyway, I'll leave it there in terms of the reading for today. There's a few more paragraphs, but I'll finish there for today. And open things up for any questions or reflections. No? Okay, maybe I'll finish we've got 10 more minutes, I'll finish the last paragraphs. That kind of abandonment gives a fine edge and confidence to the mind. Such stability is likened to a threefold refuge, the triple gem, constituting Buddha, the quality of dispassionate attention, Dhamma, the way it is, and Sangha, the resolute practice. They, rather than the desire to become or get rid of anything, are the guides of the mind through the haze of unknowing. Rather than attainment in terms of progress towards cessation, it would be more accurate to talk of purification, not in a puritanical sense or in terms of righteousness, but likened to the purity of water. The metaphor of purity provides a more helpful direction and determinant of good practice. It's not about adding things to one's self-image, or about gaining something that is not already here. It's about losing, not winning. About losing the conceit and the greed and the doubt and the delusions that prevent one from seeing things as they really are and living in accordance with the truth. The Buddha said his teaching was for those with a little dust in the eyes. What is needed then is a cleansing, not more makeup. As the practice of cessation matures, the mind realizes stream entry, a pleasing metaphor. Stream entry is the beginning of being completely composed upon the path. With that level of clarity, one no longer has the instinctive need to hold on to the body and its image as oneself. Rather, one treats it wisely as part of nature. Similarly, you're not looking at someone else's physical image as an expression of their enlightenment, or lack of it. With stream entry, there is no longer any doubt that the path is based on purity of body and speech and leads to fruition. Doubt about the connection to the foundation of practice through the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha does not arise. With this mature understanding also comes a more balanced attitude regarding the use of techniques, conventions and practices. One can use them sensibly, avoiding the extremes of either slavishly following them or rebelliously rejecting them. So that's the other aspects of stream entry as the breaking through self-view, attachment to the body and the personality, letting go of attachment to conventions, forms, traditions and practices as being absolute ends in themselves, faith in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and then doubt about what is the path and what is not the path. If the path is cultivated to the point of the cessation of self-view, the desire to become something else is completely irrelevant, and so it's forgotten. What is involved is a lightening of the heart, not an intensification of one's self-preoccupation, opinions, and convoluted reasoning to justify objectionable conduct. The path is straight and clear, of one quality in its outward form and its inner essence, without paradox, noble, uplifting, beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end. When suffering fades out, when desire is relinquished, what is left? What is present? There is the cessation, the rest from desire. Stewing away with some hankering or desire is not our fundamental nature. Yet we have to train the mind to attend to those peaceful spaces, however momentarily they may be experienced. To experience this, even briefly, to get a real taste, gives one the confidence that there is now no suffering. And then he quotes from this famous passage from the Anguttara. Bhikkhus, this mind is luminous, and it is only defiled by transitory defilements. Pabasaramidang bhikkhave akandukehi kilesehi is the Pali for that. Non-suffering is our true nature. It's not something that has to be added. And that is what the cultivation of the Eightfold Path is about. It's a way of bringing the mind's undistorted nature into full consciousness. That cultivation is broad as well as sharp, peaceful as well as energetic, as the next section of the sutta points out. So that particular passage, Pabasaramidang bhikkhave, the nature of the mind is radiant. It is only defilements are only visitors. Akandukehi, like the defilements only come along and visit. That's a very very much quoted teaching in the forest tradition, both by Luang Pu Man and many of his disciples, and that becomes a very sort of central principle that it's the mind's nature in and of itself is pure and radiant, and it's only that purity, that innate say freedom and clarity is obstructed by defilements, things that come along and obscure that, but the mind's nature is in and of itself intrinsically pure, and you find that many of Luang Pu Cha's teachings as well. Okay, no other questions?
A small thought, Ajahn. I was just thinking on the helping others bit. It was sort of like, I think this is how the story goes, I'm not an expert on this sort of stuff, but the yogi Sameda, sees Dhamma from the sky, doesn't he, and then comes down and...
He was on the road.
Well, no, there's some say the sky's on the road, okay. And then he says, who's that there? And said, that's a Buddha, And he can be an arahant if he wants to, but he decides to, he lies down on the ground in front of them, makes a vow to help all sentient beings, and Buddha says to him, in the future you'll be a Buddha because you have this aspiration. So I think sometimes it is, I know you can get sort of help burnout and things like that, but I just think it's a very beautiful aspiration to want to help others, Sometimes if the motivation's right, if you feel that understanding of suffering,
Yes, I agree completely. But that particular point was to encourage us to look at what that motivation is, and being around, I spent many years around a lot of people involved in a lot of helping caring professions, and that it's very noble and beautiful, but it's also it's important to be able to know how to not identify with that, or to not to be having your whole sense of worth being built around that, because also sometimes people get so busy caring for others and sort of wrapped up in that activity that they're causing all kinds of difficulties in their own home, that they're so busy working hard to rescue others, that their own relationship with their children is cracking up, or that their marriage is under a great deal of stress, and so that those noble intentions are all having all kinds of painful consequences as well. So that's why that sense of reflection and exploring, okay, what's behind this, or how am I handling this, or what else is involved in this? I have this intention or this motivation to help others, but how does that fit in with the other elements of my life, and what's driving this? Can I help, and can I also leave things alone? How do I feel if I can't help? Can I be at peace with that if something is out of my scope and something I can't help with? And that therefore you're balancing the wisdom faculty with the faith, or the compassion faculty, and they need each other. Too much compassion without wise reflection leads to burnout and that kind of situation where you know, that sense of needing to be needed. That if you're not getting that kind of feedback from others, you feel worthless or insecure.
It kind of works the other way too. Why do I want to liberate myself and not feel that? That can work that way too, you know. So, I mean, I'm just thinking in the middle way. Sometimes it's like, oh well, I must let go of everything because then it's going to be okay. Or I want to help everybody because then it's going to, the middle way sort of goes between those two, doesn't it? So if you just said, I want to be, or if you've got all of your effort into just being an island, or thinking, I've got to be an island, you might suffer then, you know. If it wasn't skillful.
Yes. I've never met, in all the years I've been practicing, I've never met anyone who thinks like that. I don't know if you have, but I haven't.
It's really subtle, isn't it? It's sort of like, you know, that aspiration. It's, I want to be enlightened, but why?
Well, it's important for people to consider that. I mean, usually the motivation is because there is suffering. It's the experience of not being happy, not being, say, secure. Everyone's different. I'm sure you have a whole different set of ways of expressing it, but that sense of I'm not as happy as I feel I could be. I'm not as free as I feel I could be. There's something I can do about this life to make it better.